What do you want to know?
Everything.
You can't do everything.
So first of all, it's a 4-barrel Holley carb, right?
Vacuum secondary.
Vacuum secondary.
This is your vacuum pot. Opens these two guys right there, that little lever, which is controlled by vacuum. This guy is your throttle. It hooks to your throttle cable. And then that one opens the secondaries by vacuum. So that's controlled by basically engine load, right? Essentially. So the secondaries will open slower, because if they open too quick, like that, then it'll get a big ball sometimes. Unless things are set just perfect. This is better for a street setup, more so. So this is what's called a 4160 carburetor. The difference being the main comparative carburetor to this, there are several, but the main comparative carburetor to this is a 4150, which is usually what you'd see more on a race application than a street a street application. So to look at it, you wouldn't see a lot of differences until you start looking close. So this is the float bowl from there to there, same on the back. The difference being, right here, this side doesn't have that. So this is your metering block. This back doesn't have a metering block. These are idle mixture screws. It also houses a power valve and basically transfers fuel to different places, right? So this is essentially, the back copies the front instead of having its own circuits. That'd be the simplest way to put that. Typically, so the other thing you'll see, this is what's called, this is not a double pumper carburetor. This is your accelerator pump. When you hit that, this little pump comes down. This is your pump right here. And it will squirt fuel out of two little jets that are down in there. You won't see that because there's no fuel in it, but if it did, you would go like that and they would squirt out. If this was a double pumper carburetor, you would see a secondary pump right there. And it would do the same thing here. So you'd get 4 squirts, right? Instead of 2. Again, not necessarily on a mild-mannered built engine. Lots of controversy about what people think is better or worse. Typically speaking, I would say this is more of a street carburetor than a race carburetor for that reason. A race carburetor needs a very large squirt of fuel because of long duration camshafts, that sort of thing. So not only would you necessarily see double pumpers, but you would also see, this is a 30cc pump. Typically you would see a 50cc pump. The difference you would see in that is the amount of volume of fuel they actually hold. So the thickness here would be much bigger on a 50cc pump. The 50cc pump would come down to about here, right? And it would squirt a lot more fuel. It'd be pretty rare to see 2 50cc pumps, but sometimes people would put one on. So you get a bigger shot of fuel to overcome that lean condition from a long duration camshaft, if that makes sense. So these are simpler. There's only 2 idle mixture screws. They control your fuel, air-fuel ratio at idle. On a basically a double pumper carburetor with 2 metering, this is metering body here, you would see 4 mixture screws. You would be setting 4-corner, what they call 4-corner idle mixture. Something that has extreme radical cams. Typically, you'll see a little set screw right there. And that actually increases airflow on the secondary throttle a little bit. So if you have a radical built engine, you may sometimes need to open that a little bit to give it increased airflow at idle, just to make an engine idle. But that's getting into very radical built engines. You can clearly see the positioning of 2 pumps here. So, let's take it apart. First thing I want to do is take off this vacuum secondary thing. The choke's already been removed. And we'll go from there. See what's in the side of this thing. So this spring actually controls at what pressure this diaphragm will open. So if you want to change how quick or how late the secondaries open on this carburetor, that spring is how you do it. There's different calibrations to them, right? And the other screw. Let's get this stuff out of the way, I guess. And it's been quite a while since I've had one of these things apart, because most carburetors I've played with are not vacuum secondary. This one's a little bit not what I would normally mess with. But it's what we have. It works. It actually works quite well for that engine setup, frankly. It works. Over there. Guy gonna come in there? There's a little clip in there. Leave that there, I guess. Yeah, that's it. I'm ready. You know this is gonna go flying. Oh, there it is. Almost got it.
It's the tiniest little C-clip.
Never. This is just going to have a big diaphragm in it. That's all it's going to be in this. I guess we'll take it out since we're here.
So what are you looking for in here?
Here?
That's not running right.
Well,
Right now, what are you expecting to see?
bad gaskets, warpage, dirt, loose screws. Could be a whole mirage of stuff. The other thing, and you won't probably see it, is passages that are clogged up with dirt. So on this carburetor, I'll show you. There's some pretty basic things here. This thing's running really rich, this carburetor. Somebody, this is a big no-no, put Teflon tape in here. It's a big fucking no-no. That's someone who don't know why or how or what the fuck they're doing or what planet they live on. There's absolutely zero reason to ever do that because it doesn't seal on them threads. It's not a pipe thread. The fuel line that goes into this has a beveled fitting, like a brake line, that seals right there on that taper. If you see that, right there. So there is absolutely zero reason to do that. Why anybody would do that is because they don't know any better. If you would actually use their brain for more than a hat rack and thought about what they're doing for a second, they would have realized that wasn't necessary. By the way, that is where, that's an interesting thing. Why is that in there floating? That's not supposed to be there.
There's your problem.
Not necessarily, but it's not supposed to be there. That's a gasket that goes under here. When you take the needle sheets out. I'm assuming why that would be in there. Somebody dropped it. This is where your fuel comes in, by the way. And feeds your float bowls, right? So, now, take this pump off here, I guess. Tray, don't we? Yeah, you got that with me. Just dump it on the here, that's your actual pump. So if this thing wasn't actually squirting fuel when you pump it, you would find probably a little rupture in this somewhere, usually. This here is a one-way check valve. So it kind of works like a foot valve in a water pump. It sucks in and then it locks it so the water doesn't bleed out. Same idea. You want this to maintain fuel, otherwise you'd have to pump it several times to get fuel to come up, right? It needs to stay in there. So that's what that does. That's a one-way check valve. So that the fuel is there and ready to go every time. Let's see. Talk about that stuff here in a second. These here little guys, there's two ways to set the float levels in these float bowls. This is one of them. That's not going to fit. You adjust them there till the fuel runs out here, which is kind of tough to do on an engine with a mechanical fuel pump. That you have to run the engine because the engine's going to vibrate, right? But with an electric pump, you can just turn the pump on.
Low power mode or close, which one do I hit?
So what you would do, this here, if you take this as a lock nut, but when you turn this, I'm going to show you in a second, it takes the float level up and down. And you want it that it just runs out of that hole. That's one way to, the other way to set the floats in this is to take a measurement with them, right? Because you don't want them too lean, you don't want them too rich. It'll be fairly... Oh, boy. Here's your float. So, a little bit of crud in there. So, fuel comes in. Behind here, there's a needle valve. It rises that up. When it gets to the point of shutting the needle valve off, then the fuel stops. There's just some crap in there. Quite a bit of corrosion. Huh? It's sitting around. So, here's what I want to show you about how to adjust that when you turn this. See how that adjusts up and down? Right? See that? Mm-hmm. So the biggest thing with this is you do actually want to check these floats and make sure that they actually float. Sometimes they'll actually get, they will actually get holes in them and they'll get saturated with fuel. And they'll get waterlogged and then they won't lift. They won't actually float properly. This is where your needle valve is, which is a very common failure point. When you get a carburetor that floods out and pumps gas all over the place, that's usually the reasoning. A piece of dirt gets stuck in these needle valves. And then they don't shut off the fuel. They just keep pumping fuel over, and then they'll overflow fuel. Usually they'll come out of this vent. That's usually what will happen. Needle valve, there's your float. Empty. The only other thing in there is this check valve. That's for your accelerator pump. There's the needle valve. See it right in there. The guy in there. Just a little valve right there. They get dirt and they will stick. Cause you massive headaches. Now, this little fella stuck on there pretty good.
What's all that crap in there?
It's just that. It's crap, corrosion, dirty fuel, all the above. And yeah, that's, look at this. Man, see the piece of crap right there? Stuck in. These are your main jets. So that wouldn't be transferring much fuel right there, would it? Wow. Blocked right off. And just guessing that's fuel sitting around. The other thing is, this carburetor is no good. It is corroded to death. This is garbage. Look at it. See? Cracked, split. Literally. Rotten. Wow.
So if you were to put that in that acid, it still wouldn't be any good after
That's
that?
garbage. If that's it, you're throwing that away. That's a piece of junk. It's like literally, like whatever was in that actually ate the aluminum that this, or magnesium, or whatever the damn thing's made out of. It's just corroded to death. Huh. Garbage. That needs a new metering block. I can't even imagine what caused that. Huh. Just crumbling. Wow. That's insane. Like right there, look. It's just rotten. Absolutely rotten. That's incredible. Absolutely incredible.
First time you seen that?
Yes, that is the first time I've seen that. Ever. I don't know if it's from he was buying fuel with E85 in it, maybe, which is very corrosive. That would be my guess. But around here, they don't sell E85, but they do sell, you know, certain fuel. Plugged right up. Absolutely insane. You can barely see through that, right? And if you look at the other one, whatever I did with it, it's right in there somewhere. You see a big difference. I don't even know how this ran, frankly. No wonder the thing worked miserable. Like, just wow. That's the only words I have for that is wow.
Can you buy just that one piece?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
imagine. I'm hoping, but
So the rest of the carburetor shouldn't be like that inside, would it?
well, we're gonna find out.
This looks like it's zinc or something. This looks aluminum.
This here is a, I'm trying to find something to take it off with. This is your power valve, this guy. And very important part of the carburetor, especially when they backfire and blow them out. There's a little number stamped on this to tell you what it is, but it's hard to see that one. Looks like it's a 5. Yeah, right there. Pretty tough to see. Right there, that's a 5. So that means that will increase your fuel. It'll enrich in the mixture when it hits 5 inches of vacuum. So what you do is you measure the amount of vacuum you have on your car in drive, idling. Mm-hmm. And typically you want to take, so if you had 10 inches of vacuum, you want a 5 power valve. So if you had 12, you might want 6. If you, most carburetor kits, most factory Holleys come with a 6.5. What you do is you check that, you hold that closed, and try to seal it here. And if you can seal that or feel it pull vacuum, which that one is, then you know that that diaphragm is good. So you can, it's really hard to seal that with your finger, but I don't know if you can see that. When I pull it off, it opens a bit. Hear it? So that power valve's actually good, but I put a new one in it anyway. And I actually have one, it's gonna get a 4.5, that's what it's gonna get. But this is very disappointing. Not only is it corroded, it looks like it's actually warped, but it's hard to tell that with the eye. But this looks really good. No corrosion. Looks really clean. Why that's in the shape it's in, I have no idea. Again, that's a first for me. I've never seen a metering block that rotten. I'm guessing they were buying gas and lean that had E85 in it and parked the car for extended periods of time. That's what I'm guessing, and it just sat there and corroded. Right? Again, it's a complete guess. I'll never know. But where you get one's a thing. Well, they probably ordered one, but I was hoping to have this running tomorrow. That's not going to happen.
Drag strip's canceled in the morning, but they're having a thing at 5 o'clock. Only $15 to go.
Okay, so that's interesting. This one has a different float in it than the other side. Usually they have the same one. This is like, you know, some sort of plastic material. That one's brass. So because this doesn't have a secondary metering block in it. It just has this little transfer plate, I guess, for lack of a better name. Pull this out. This is your secondary needle valve. You don't usually see a lot of problems with the brass floats like that one. You have to be, but these guys here are pretty important to check. And you just gotta put it in, you know. Just put it in a jug and fill it up and make sure it floats. Doesn't sink or get saturated, you know. But that's not the problem with this carburetor. I can already see the problem with this carburetor. Corrosion and garbage. There's the problem with this carburetor. I don't even know how it ran, like you know. I mean, I drove this car. It amazes me it ran as good as it did. This is the kind of stuff you'd normally see, which is just remaining fuel, old crap fuel. These here take a special tool to get them out, which I do have one, and I have no idea where that is. So, in the meantime, we'll take the base plate off. There's not really much to see there. Just take that off and take the gasket out of it. Here's one thing very overlooked on Holley carburetors. I want to take this base plate off and show what can happen. This one hopefully is good. Main body of the carburetor. All it takes for one of these guys to go bad is you just see a little bit like leakage or something like that, and that's normal there because that's a transfer tube for. But these gaskets look actually really good. I don't think there's any problems with them. Obviously, you wouldn't reuse them, but you can see how rich this was running. Extremely rich, right? It's all soot, right? And any one of these little orifices.
So if it was running lean, would it look the opposite to the clean?
Well, yeah, it wouldn't look like all dry and fluffy like that. All these little passages, that's what you're cleaning. When you soak this guy, every one of them needs to be cleaned. So, there's a special tool for taking them out. I have one. Good luck finding it. I have no idea where it is whatsoever. It's been so long since I've had one of these apart. You'll probably find a small screwdriver to fit in there though. There we go. One thing about Holleys, they're very, very, very easy to change things. You could make this a carburetor double pumper if you wanted to. It's just a little tube to transfer. Transfer plate, right? That's all this is. Ooh. A little bit of fuel in there yet. All the those gaskets look pretty good. They weren't. There was no issues with that. This carburetor sat around and rotted. It's off to death. That's what happened to this. So, what happens to these guys, who rebuild carburetors, they jam these screws too tight and they'll warp this thing. That's what they'll do. And that's something that's very, I've seen more than one carburetor. They came in and actually they're just rebuilt and wouldn't run good. And they wouldn't run properly. And that's what was wrong with them. This was warped. And you'll never get it to seal right if it's warped. So this is a precision machine straight edge. So we're just going to grab a feeler gauge to check. See if this size works. Let's start with something small. 0.02 of an inch, maybe. And just try to put that in right there. And that's good. Whoops. That's not what you're supposed to do. That's the smallest one I have is 1.5 thousandths of an inch. And all. See that? It's actually really good. It's just starting. I think if I had a 1,000th, it might actually go in there. See that? See that? Maybe not. Yeah, that has a very slight warpage. Again, this should be cleaned to do this. I'm just showing this quickly. I think that's all it was that corrosion buildup. Now it's not going. But that's an important thing to check on carburetors, Holleys anyway, because people jam them screws too tight and they'll warp this guy. And when that guy's warped, I promise you, you'll never get your car to run right, no matter how hard you try. That's pretty good. Right there, there's a little bit of, again, I think if we cleaned all that crap off, it would, and rechecked that, I think it's gonna be fine, which we're gonna do. Right now, this carburetor needs a cleaning. It should have a new metering block there, which is disappointing to me. So I was hoping to have this done tonight, tomorrow. And that's pretty much it. You take all this stuff and clean it, preferably in a solution that you can soak it in or dip it in, which is tough to find this stuff today. And there's a can right there that you should remove because it's plastic if you're going to use caustic chemicals. And that's actually opens, that's what the accelerator pump runs on. You can buy different ones of those as well with different shapes to them that will make your accelerator pump more or less aggressive on the opening. But anything plastic or rubber in this guy needs to come out if you're going to soak it in caustic chemicals. A little bit of play in that shaft, which is another problem if it gets too bad. That one isn't very good either. This side's good right there. Barely moves, right? But that guy there's got quite a bit of play in it right there. See that? Set it right there. You can get a bushing put in that. And if you wanted to do a really proper job on this carburetor, that's what you'd do. Is put a bushing in there. The rest of them are pretty good. But that right there is a disaster. And it's pretty hard to find a used one. It's not like people are gonna take a good carburetor, take the metering block and do it. Look at this. It's insane. Scrape that gasket off of there or something. Again, that's where your power valve goes. If you start looking at these things, you'll start to see there's some pretty small orifices, like there, and there, and there. And you can see some of the, it's an old gasket. You start getting a little corrosion on there like that. It doesn't take much to plug them up. And that's what we can see. What we can't see is on the inside. I don't know if you can see that. It's even right there. It's even, you zoom in on that one, it's even buckled from corrosion. Right, that's the external. Like, if you look at that, it almost looks like it comes up. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, you almost wonder if that didn't have water in it and froze or something. I mean, there's no way to know, but that's terrible. I don't know. I've never seen anything like that. I mean, I'm sure there's worse ones, but this carburetor was bought new.